This podcast is an expression of the personal views and opinions of the hosts and guests, and they do not represent the official stance of the podcast, its sponsors, or affiliated organizations. The podcast may cover topics such as drugs, mental illness, politics, and religion, which can be controversial or sensitive. The podcast does not support any illegal activities and advises listeners to seek help from appropriate professionals for any personal concerns related to these topics. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only, and it is not a substitute for professional advice. Listeners are urged to consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any questions regarding their mental or physical health. The podcast and its creators are not responsible for any loss or harm resulting from the use or reliance on the information provided in the podcast.
Turn my mic up.
Let's get it on.
What's up, guys? Thank you guys for joining us here on this episode. This recording is being done on Father's Day weekend. It's kind of funny how it landed right on the particular topic that we wanted to discuss today, which is about parenting. I feel like Stoicism has really helped me out a lot in regards to parenting, and I think it's something that it's worth sharing. And I'm sure that you guys, as well as parents, have had some sort of positive, influence from Stoicism and practicing it, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a few questions that I kind of pulled up here. I kind of got ChatGPT to provide it over to me, that I feel that will probably help us in the direction here of discussing this particular topic. Here, one of our first questions here asks, when it comes to parenting in today's fast-paced world, how can Stoic principles provide practical insights on offering genuine encouragement to our children, fostering their self-esteem and resilience in the face of societal pressure and challenges? You guys have any experience in that?
That's kind of a long question. Say the first part again.
It says, when it comes to parenting in today's fast-paced world, how can Stoic principles provide practical insights on offering genuine encouragement to our children?
Encouragement. Man, I think because I like to think of Stoic philosophy as, for me personally, an emotional regulation type of tool, maybe even like a social one. Primarily emotional, though. It definitely helps me, not sway too heavy either way. And what I mean by that is, like, usually, your kid does something really good, and parents can often get really deep into like heavy positive reinforcement. And then they'll realize that, that doesn't work forever. And it doesn't, you start to develop like a threshold, just like anything else. And so it's temporary. And then on the other side of that spectrum, right, you get into like the heavy discipline. Like, I remember before I had kids, people like, I would never spank my kid. And I'm like, you're going to be that parent with those kids at Walmart that won't I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? It's like you got those two opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think Stoicism, for sure, in its philosophy, and more than likely other philosophies too, is all about finding a balance. And it's not abusing one side of the spectrum or the other. And, some people might initially trying to apply that to everyday lives or parenting, I'm sure everybody's heard of that pendulum swing, and it's either we're heavy this side and we're heavy that side. Like the pendulum swings one way and then it goes back the other way. At jobs, that could look like, hey, we have a policy on this, and then it goes for a few months, people don't like it, now we don't have the policy at all. Rather than working in that gray area, and what I see is finding a balance is not even dipping into those extremes, but more, for the use of analogies, being the rock in the eye of the storm, right? Like, or being the eye of the storm, like the rock in the storm, rather, the rock in the storm, just not moving, not swaying any one direction. And what I've noticed in applying it is, kids have temper tantrums. If you don't react to the temper tantrum, negative or positive, they like give you this, this look. Like at first they're throwing their heads down, they're beating the ground or pillow or whatever, and then you don't do anything, and they like stop and they like listen, and then they peek over at you, and they see that you're still there, and then and they go on with their temper tantrum, but you still don't do anything, and then they look over again, and the next thing you know, it's done. And so I think, that's, at least for me, how Stoic principles have, affected my parenting, and, being encouraging, not allowing them to, go too far into failure, and then just, making sure that I'm not rewarding them for everything that they do, right? Like you shouldn't get awards for doing the everyday stuff. It's when you go above and beyond. You have an extremely good art project in school, or you do very well at whatever task, whatever that is, but not the every day-to-day stuff. That's kind of what society's moving to. And even Plutarch talked about how the Spartans wouldn't one of the kings of Sparta wouldn't allow any Spartan citizens to compete in games in which the winner's hand was held up, because you shouldn't be rewarded for something that you're expected to do. And you just gotta, if you abuse either things, they don't mean anything. If you're always telling your kids, hey, that's fantastic, and you're getting worked up, it works for a little while, but then that will soon perish. And then same thing with spanking. And I can see why, so many people say that can lead to abuse, is because, you pat your kid on the butt, but then after a while it doesn't affect them, or they laugh, and then your emotions, because they're dysregulated at the time, get the better of you. Now you got to spank them a little harder, or you spank them twice, whatever it is. And it's like, do you even really need to do that? Do they even understand? Do they even understand that what they did was wrong? And then so just taking the time to teach them, like, and not asking them questions like, does that make sense, or do you understand? They're going to, it's only going to elicit a response that they understand makes you stop doing whatever they don't want you to do, or to do whatever they want you to do. So when you ask anyone really, do you understand, or does that make sense? It's unclear. You have to be more articulate than that. That's what I think.
I completely agree with you, man. I have a unique perspective coming into all of this as somebody who was already a parent and then got into Stoicism, and then I'm able to see what it's done for me as far as how I am with parenting, how I am with my kids now. Before, I would say, and then I would even say from the time my daughter was born, she's 7, up until she was maybe 6 years old. Yeah, she's 5.5. I I was really, I would say, on edge kind of thing when it came to parenting, because I guess, and that's what we all do, right? We revert back to what we only knew in a sense. And it was always the understanding of I don't like doing that. I don't like being that parent that's always kind of shouting, yelling commands and stuff like listen to me. I'm talking to you like and then just shouting like why aren't you guys listening to me? And not realizing, not figuring it out. And then little by little, with everything that has happened to me and then stoicism, man, I it's helped me as far as, being patient. Now connected to CT. Being patient and being able to not have those type of reactions anymore, right? The reactions that you were describing as far as just standing there and just don't even give them any, it works. That works, dude. There's times when I'll ask questions now. It's like, okay, and are you making your point with what you're doing right now? Because it's really not doing anything. And I just give them a super monotone, just I'm not affected conversation, and that helps because when they notice that you're not affected by what's going on and that what they're doing, which is just to kind of get your attention in a weird way, even though for an adult it doesn't make any sense. But as a kid, we do things that are an expression of our emotions. And the way that they come out is in those frustrations. And that's the only way that they can articulate that is through those behaviors. And we just need to have that understanding. It's frustrating. It requires a lot of patience. But through patience, these type of behaviors can be like lowered, less made. It can probably they grow out of certain phases, or they just learn to control them themselves. They know that you're not affected by that, and then they find it, or through other means we discuss, how you can express your emotions where you're heard, because I know that a lot of times it's about that. It's about that feeling of I want to be heard, and this is the reaction that you get because they want to be heard in some sort of form, and that's the only way that they can express themselves. So it's I'm happy, I'm thankful, man, that I've been able to for all of this to click and be able to just be the parent now where I'm not. It used to bug me that my kids used to come and ask me all the time, like they wanted something, and I'd be like, like, again, and I would get up, annoyed, having to go and do it. And now I think about it, it's just like, who else? Like, who else is supposed to get up and do it? There's nobody else. That you're the one that they depend on. So I get up now and I just go through it, and just because regardless, I'm gonna have to get up and do it. Now, maybe this is a transition now into discussions as far as like some of the teachings that we have, as far as like just making, like raising kids that are a little bit more dependent on themselves, that are able to not be cuddled too much, where they're not, as far as me, I'm not a helicopter parent at all. Especially now with our third kid, she runs around, bumps her head, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, oh my god!" And we're like, "She's fine. She rubs it off and just keeps running," and she does. And that's the most hilarious thing to see. But one of the things that we try to have them do is things independently. Like my kid, the oldest now is 7. We already have taught her how to fold her clothes. We have already taught her how to pour cereal into a bowl with milk. Start preparing her breakfast in the mornings. So she's able to be a little bit more independent in those aspects, right? She's able to also help her sister, who sometimes needs help with certain things like reaching for certain items or reading. My oldest daughter is really good at reading, and she's able to help my middle child read certain things because they're constantly asking each other, or she's constantly asking her stuff like, what does that say? What number is that? So she's learning also to be that older sister who teaches, who's there for her younger sisters. So yeah, Stoicism has helped me out a lot, man, especially in that aspect of parenting. What about you, Mike? How do you feel that Stoicism has helped you in parenting?
Well, for me, Stoicism has completely transformed how not only am I a father, but also how am I a husband as well. Um, really, just the basic principle of you can only control what you can control. So, the things that I can control is making sure that my son has the things that he needs in order to uh, survive, right? So I buy his clothes, food, all that stuff. What I can't control is what he's interested in. Um, but in the same token, like Nate was saying, keeping that balance. Uh, I really try to not push the stoicism on my son, but like in the morning, I read a page out of Meditations every morning, and I'll find a quote out of something that I wrote, and I'll put it on a note card. And before I leave for work, everybody's still in bed. I'll put it on his little computer desk, and just give him a little bit of a nugget. The biggest thing, and I know we refer to this the poem "If" quite a bit. Is not only teaching my son, in this particular stanza as well, we refer to a lot. You, if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters exactly the same. So, one, I want my son to be able to do that, and two, as a parent, I have to do the same for him. So, when he has a success, don't celebrate it too much. Let him know he did a good job, right? But he still has more work to do. Same with the disaster. The disaster is, something disaster. He gets in trouble in school. I get a phone call from the school where he's done some stupid 14-year-old thing. And so I have to meet that same disaster with the same way that I treated the triumph. Instead of, Jay, like you were talking, screaming and yelling at him, which I'm guilty of that. Meeting him where he's at, have him solve the problem, and not me just screaming and yelling and telling him what he should do and what he should have done different. But he needs to figure that out so he can learn. And in Stoicism, it really, really helps me keep that balance. And there are times where I fail. And that's, just another example of where I can model, like, okay, like I screwed up. I did bad. I shouldn't have disciplined you that way, or I shouldn't have raised my voice. But I'm not going to do it next time. So, just, it helps me keep that balance and really uh, really model and give my son the impression that he needs to constantly do better. Even if he is doing good, he still needs to do better.
Good stuff. Yeah, man. It's a it's a little difficult, I guess, for me, or I wouldn't say difficult. It's just unique because I'm a father of three girls.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
buddy.
it's I I I tend to have a way of being real hard as far as what my expectations are of them and kind of the way that just the expectations that I have for them, right? uh, just and also the way that I grew up, respect, the respecting of your parents was very heavily, forced on to me, where it's like, you respect me, I'm your father, I'm your mother, you respect your elders, this and this and that. It's a good concept to have. I understand that. And I'm understanding it now too, where it's like not everything needs to be taken as an insult or a disrespect from a child because they don't understand that concept of respect just right off the bat.
Oh man.
They don't and I know that, and I have a hard time. It's more of me battling my reactions than to than battling my understanding that this is happening, because I still find
Oh
myself
man.
sometimes still getting very upset over some of the reactions or some of the things or comments that some of my daughters may say to me in certain instances where I'm just like, why, why are you putting me in this situation right now? And if I do end up in that situation where I fail and I still am able to, you know mend things and approach it again and apologize and say I was wrong, I didn't mean to do that, I don't like doing that, but it's just I'm working on it. And I've told my kids too, like, hey, I'm working on this. I don't like being like this. I don't like yelling. I don't like screaming. I don't like having to raise my voice at you. But you don't make it easy. I'm trying, and all I'm asking is for your cooperation as well. I'm asking you guys to do this. Listen when I ask you to do certain things, and we'll be in a better position. So they've also been understanding as well. So it's a kind of a dual thing where I'm giving some part and they're giving their part, and it's working out. And just the fact that I'm able to acknowledge that and be able to say, okay, I'm wrong, I shouldn't have done that, and be able to tell my daughters like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you, I didn't mean to do that, and come to a peaceful ending, a resolution, pretty much to it. And that's always what I look for, a peaceful resolution. I don't want them having to go to sleep or have that in their head that you know that I'm some sort of asshole, that I am too strict on them, and I don't try to be, because they're girls. I know that there's a certain, you don't raise a son the same way that you would raise a girl, like a daughter. So it's hard, even though I don't have no sons. I have to try to figure that out, right? I have to try to not be that type of person with my daughters, and and yeah, man, it's great. It's great how it's helped me out with all of that stuff.
Yo, I don't know if you guys got something, but Jay, as you were talking, you said a couple of things that really stuck out in my mind. Uh, Before I go on, Mike, your wife is pregnant, yes?
Yep, she is.
And
Yep.
then you guys found out the gender
Yep.
already?
Yep. It's gonna be a girl. So yeah.
This your first?
And
Nice.
it's my wife's first. It's my second. My
Okay.
son is 14. So there's a big age gap. I was married once before. But yeah, I mean, I remember we found out, and the next day I went, and I think it was Nate and one of our other coworkers. I was telling him, I was like, man, I'm gonna have a girl. Like I don't know what to do. Like I've raised a boy for so. But then Nate said something to me that really made a whole lot of fucking sense. Uh, he's like, dude, your job is is done. You just get to be a dad to a girl. It's your job to make your son a good man. But do you know what it's like to be a good woman? I know it's 2023, but I know nothing about being a woman. And uh that's exactly right. Right? That's my wife's job. Like she's going to be the one that's going to be doing all that stuff to teach my daughter how to be a woman. You know, I can show her what she needs to find in a good man so she has healthy relationships, right? That's what I can do. But as far as like I'm excited just to be a dad, you know, and not that I'm not a dad to my son. That's not what I'm trying to get at all. But like there is a heavy responsibility as a father to a son that I don't want him to grow up and to be some misogynistic pig, right? Um, and he's getting to be 14. We joke, we play, we tell dirty jokes to each other. Uh, in fact, the other day he was driving past one of my friends, and he's like, "Dad, unlock the window," because he's sitting in the back seat in the car. He's like, "Dad, unlock the window." I was like, "Why the fuck do you want me to unlock the window?" And he goes, "I wanted to flip off your friend." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So unlock the window. So uh, he definitely has picked up on a lot that we've joked about, and so uh, I'm really trying to uh, impress upon him that being a man is hard. Like it's hard. It's hard to be a man or a girl, and in order to be a good man, you have to have something that you believe in and something that you stand for. Uh, but I'm just excited that I don't have to do any of that with my daughter. So,
Hey, Mike, you said something that is, I think I probably already mentioned it somewhere in one of the episodes. That is what I am doing, everything that I'm doing with, all the art stuff that I'm doing, the podcast, what this all is, pretty much. What I said was my motivation is, my daughters. I'm trying to build something
mm-hmm,
here. It's for them, and the other thing is, I I want them to have an example of what a good man is, and I want
mm-hmm,
them to have that as an example of what they should also find, or what a good man resembles, pretty much. Because
mm-hmm,
I've seen a lot of people around me. I've seen people just end up in situations and end up with partners where I'm just I don't, and it doesn't sometimes make sense, and I think it's always because they're looking for something that they didn't have, or they had a misconception of what they a love is, or what a relationship should consist of. And I think if I'm able to at least instill that in my daughters, as far as a good, the true values of what a good man should be, how they should conduct themselves, then that's the type of example that they already know to look for in a person that they are looking for as a partner. And that's all that for me is important now. Everything else is, I think, secondary. I've made this kind of my life motto, my life mission is just to provide some sort of quality of life for my daughters through proper teachings, proper learning, proper education growing up, and also what we instill at home as far as values, what we consider as okay and what we may not, and what they should look for too in in someone out there in society, which, because it's going to get harder. That's the thing. It's going to get harder for anybody growing up to find a partner, because everybody's going to be into so many different things now, and that you're going to end up finding somebody that's has the same as you is going to be harder. And for someone who probably grew up with good morals, good values in life, that'll probably be very difficult to find someone in the future, because of everything else, distractions that we've talked about. People spend a lot of times just in growing up as in video games and stuck in that world,
Mm-hmm.
and then have a misconception of what reality is. They grow up thinking that life should be this way, when that's not how reality works. Just why I want to be able to raise them to have a good sense of that, a good sense of don't get lost. Don't go into thinking that you need to have all the flashy things in life in order to feel accomplished, to be successful, because it's not necessary. I've had to learn that myself, and that's what I want to be able to teach them, that they don't have to have everything, that they don't need, that it isn't about owning everything. It's more about the experiences that we have, especially as family. And so that's where where I've pretty much made that, where I want to make sure that my daughters have that example, and that's all I can be. That's the reasons why I continue pushing forward through this.
So to jump back into the two things that I pulled off of what Jay said earlier, it's good. I was hoping that would elicit some cognitive flexibility there. Jay, you said you don't you don't raise a daughter the same way you raise a son, and the first thing I thought about was that thing that I told Mike, because that was actually told to me by somebody that to this day I look up to, mentor. And we happened to be working the range together one day, and we're setting up an instructor development course for the rest of our instructors. We're just hanging targets and shooting the shit. And he's like, "What's up, Nate? What's new?" And I was like, "Man, Bill, freaking, my wife's pregnant." And he was like, "Oh, congratulations." I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "What was that?" Because he'll call me on everything, man. And I was like, "Oh, dude, I don't know. I'm a little perplexed because I'm having a girl, wanted another boy." And he was like, "What?" Like, for real. And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm having a girl, I want a boy." And he was like, "Nah, dude, you got it all wrong." And I was like, "What the fuck is this guy talking about, right?" Like, this is a manly man, this guy I look up to, right? And he was like, "See, dude, Nate, when you got a boy, you got to work hard to make him into a man. And he was like, but when you have a girl, that's your wife's job. You just got to sit back and say yes all the time, because she's going to have you wrapped around her little finger. You'll see what I'm talking about. And we laughed or whatever and go on about our class. And dude, my daughter was born, and immediately, like, not that you can't count time because there was no time to count. I was like, shit, that motherfucker was right, dude. I'm already wrapped around this chick's finger when she came out. You know what I mean? And I was like, that son of a bitch. And I kept that mindset for quite some time. And it wasn't until recently that I think it's bullshit. Not I think, I know it's bullshit. Right? And Mike's laughing because he's like, shit. And
I thought that was sound
thing
advice,
is,
man.
it is. But the things for me, at least, maybe it's because I like to put my thoughts up for, like they're standing trial or something. Like, is this real? It's something I got from Stoicism is you gotta contemplate everything. And I was thinking about it. I was like, no, you know what, man? Like, there's a lot of shit that I'm gonna teach my fucking daughter. There's a lot of shit. It doesn't matter that she's a woman or a girl at the time and then later a woman. Like, I'm gonna do everything I can that I know that I can. So whatever's within my power, because what I don't know, I can't teach, right? And I'm gonna do my best at that thing. And for the longest time, I was stuck around some of the biases that Stoicism has, and it's towards males, and that's just because of the era, right? Like, a lot of things during that time were, and there's even statues that they created, right? Like, it's got a father and a son, and the father looks like Swiss cheese, got a whole bunch of holes sticking out of him. And then the kid is actually a statue made up of the pieces that they took from the father. And the metaphor there is that as parents, in this statue, it's the father that gives pieces of him to his son to build him into what he is today. They don't know it yet, but we are their morals and their ethics and their decision making. Everything that we do and say and teach them becomes them. But something that's interesting is the other day we were at work and we were talking about nonverbal and verbal communication. And we referenced this old statistic. I don't remember. It might have been 60s or 70s. And it says that 93% of our communication is nonverbal. That leaves 7% for being verbal. And if that's true, then our kids are constantly learning from our actions, not our words. So 7% of what we're saying is stuff that they're actually retaining, and 93 is through our actions, the things that we actually do. So like when Mike is talking about he can teach his daughter about the partner she should choose later in life, he's 100% right, but we can't talk about it. We can't talk about how our kid needs to be a man, or we can't talk about how our kid needs to be a woman or whatever, right? It's how do you become a good person? And we're not going to tell them how to do it. We're going to show them how to do it by doing it. And that's why I firmly believe that earlier when we were talking about, kids throwing a fit, if you don't respond to it, right, then it all works out. You're able to have a conversation. So first, it's like baby steps. You don't respond to it and then they stop. But as they grow older, they need to understand their emotions. Once they get an understanding of their emotions, they need to understand how to regulate them. And it's interesting, Mike over here, he bought Jay and I a book. He bought us, I forget what it's called, The Daily Dad or whatever, right? By Ryan Holiday.
There you go.
You got it on there? Yeah, good. The Daily Dad, 366 Meditations. Anyways, it's by Ryan Holiday, and I was reading it. And in this book, you learn a lot of stuff. And I'm going on a little bit too long, but in a nutshell, right? If we're having a bad day, okay, we had a terrible day at work. Nothing went right. Somebody at work is getting under your skin, because we all know at least one of those people. And we come home and we're thinking about that person, or that action, or not getting it approved, or losing money, or whatever the fuck we're thinking about that at the time we think's more important than our kids. Then all of a sudden our kid's like, hey, would you do this? And, no, I don't have time. Or we just end up short, or we are tired. Maybe you lost sleep. Maybe you're tired. Your kid's like, hey, would you do this with me? I'm sorry, buddy. Like, or, I'm tired. They don't understand. They just see that we're not making time for them. And if you ask me, it's sad. And I think it's only when, as parents, we decide that that's unacceptable, that we're going to start making a difference. And so one other thing that I wanted to point out that Jay said is sometimes in that communication with our kids, we tell them, depending on age, that they're not making it easy. And this is why I love this book, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They've got 3 books: Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership, and Leadership Strategies and Tactics. They're all extensions of extreme ownership, or at least the idea of that in making leaders. I think we need to own a piece of that process, but it's difficult because of the emotions that we have allowed to come forth. And so if we are telling someone else, our kids, anyone, that they're not making it easy, we're really talking about ourselves in that moment. We have not made it easy on ourselves because we have not taught them yet. And that's why earlier I said we got to stop asking questions like, do you understand? And does that make sense? They're little cop-outs. And I'm not saying I'm above this. I am human too. I do it constantly. I do it all the time. But I try to reflect on my day in the evening, and I try to remember how many times I asked it and how it could have gone better if I had asked a clarifying question or made an educated guess. Something else that would more durably solve a problem than a cop-out like, whatever. Do you understand? Right? Like, it's just not how the world works. It's not how we learn. Anyways, that's what I was thinking about this whole time. And that wasn't me calling Jay out, just for the record.
Yeah. Oh, no. That's I completely deep, understand. Because even I know in the moment that even that what I'm saying isn't right, because I shouldn't have to be at that point where I have to say that, right? Because I should be able to control my emotions and be able to just work with the situation that I can't control and try to manipulate it in the sense that I get them to cooperate with just communication, just being able to talk to them, figure out what's going on, or why aren't we doing the process that we discussed, and work towards getting that resolved. And that's pretty much how everything should be handled. But it's, again, like you were talking about it, right? It starts from where even we learned how to do all this stuff, right? And that's from when we were kids. because everything at that young age gets recorded. And like you said, they learn from observation. They learn from everything that you do, the gestures. A lot of kids have all these grown up mannerisms, and it's not that it's grown up mannerisms, it's just that they've learned it from grown ups. And they're just, some are really good at, doing certain mannerisms or being able to copy the things that their parents are doing or somebody else that, is influencing them. And kids are sponges, man. They pick up on a lot of things. They learn things so quickly, man. I understand, like, I'm aware that my daughters are pretty advanced in a sense that they're real quick at learning things. They're very good with just learning things and retaining information and being able to just pull stuff from just randomly. And that's me. And that's what I've learned too about, just as a father, we all give something off in our genetics. These kids, they pull something, each one of them has a resemblance to us, and it's a mixture of genetics and what we teach them. That's who they become. That's exactly who they become. Who they're susceptible to become is based on, whatever characteristics that they have growing up and everything that they learn. And if we don't teach them properly, then they're not going to be able to function in certain ways that maybe we would want for them to in the future, just because maybe they have experiences that they felt were traumatic, and that's something that they then hold, because I know from experience. And that's, I've heard the stories too from other people that they have something in their life, and it can change somebody. And we've talked about it. Some traumatic experience can change your life in an instant, as a survivor or somebody that you that that passed away. It changes you, the way that you are. So what we teach these kids is very important, and that has to be, protected. And I think it starts at home. It all starts at home. Hopefully, in those environments, we have parents that are able to understand that it doesn't have to be in certain ways that we grew up in the way that we were taught. There's so many examples out there. We should at least be able to learn. I think that's how I understand too, that there's a different way of being able to raise my kids is examples. I've been able to go out there and see how other people do parenting and how they manage certain things, and you're able to take those pointers or just pick up on the things that they do and just try to apply them yourself. And sometimes they work. Sometimes it's beneficial for someone, and sometimes it isn't. And that's what life is, man. And that's what parenting is. There is no right or wrong. We're all learning this as we go. We're all figuring this out. Our parents did as well. Everybody in this existence has been doing the same thing since the beginning, figuring it out. And some people have figured it out in a way that they've been able to share it, and they've been able to tell other people, hey, our kid grew up and they didn't have, issues. They were pretty successful, and this is what we did. And people learn from that, and that's kind of what I would like to provide here with some of that information.
I just finished a book not too long ago about it's called Evolve Your Brain by Joe Dispenza.
Oh, I know that person.
Yeah, and so he it's a long read, and it's dry, but there's a lot of good stuff in it. And one thing, as you were talking about, passing genetics and things and behaviors onto your kids, it reminded me something that he said in that book was that you can, you think of genetics as things that are inherently going to pass on to your children. You think of the big things like diabetes, uh, mental illness, all of that stuff. Um, you can actually change your genetics by learning new behaviors and creating new pathways in your brain, and you can pass those on to your kids too. And I think all anybody who's involved in Stoicism, um, you are passing that on to your kids, uh, whether you're trying to or not, by creating those new pathways and changing your the way you think, the way you see things, the way you react to things. Not only by modeling, but you're actually changing your brain and you're passing that on to your offspring. Um, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but I know I've talked to Nate about it. My son is actually adopted. Biologically, he would be my ex-nephew. But I'm the only dad that's ever raised him. He very much is my son. And he's picked up on a lot. Like, we go out and people will say, "Oh, you look just like your dad," or "Oh, like your dad does that same thing," and they don't know like he's adopted and he doesn't have any of my genetics. But what he's learned from me, and in both good things and bad things, I still pass those on, and he's gonna pass those on to his kids. And so, Jay, you said earlier that you were a parent and then you got into Stoicism. That's exactly what happened to me too. And one thing that I didn't, even before Stoicism, I didn't want to pass on to my son was the fact that men can't feel emotion. That's what my grandpa taught my dad, and it just went through. Even my mom's dad taught me that. And that's one thing that I want him to see, that I'm feeling emotion. That boy has seen me cry hundreds of times, and I want him to know that it's okay, to cry, right? And I want him to pass that on. And the only way to pass that on is for him to learn that and create those new pathways in his brain, and pass that on to his kids. Hopefully, I've created some new pathways that I'm going to pass on to my daughter. Kind of to piggyback on what Nate was talking about, that what he told me was bullshit. But I guess in that way, like I am passing something on. Like, I am teaching my daughter something, hopefully by creating these new pathways and creating new ways to look at things and control what you can control. Learn from somebody that you don't necessarily agree with. There's something good that's going to come in with that. Live in the moment. The present is a gift, and that is what I want both of my kids to pass on to their kids. So that's it. What you said, Jay, just really reminded me of what Joe Dispenza said in that Evolve Your Brain book. Like I said, it's a really long read. It's a dry read, but it is good. There's a lot of good stuff in it.
Yeah, I think I've seen a few of his videos somewhere on Instagram or TikTok. I've seen him. He's got some good information out there, man.
He does. He's a smart guy.
Yeah, you guys will have to send some of that stuff to me because it sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think I've shared one or two of his videos. I mean, on the Street Stoics Instagram page, on the stories, if I can find a good motivational, clip video, either Stoic related, mental health related, anything, positive in regards to just having an understanding that, just live in the moment, that we're all going through, our own problems, and we don't need to get consumed by the negativity. And that's the type of material that I like posting and I like sharing on there. So that's what I like about all of this, as far as getting into stoicism, and just providing some sort of space for people to say it's okay to to feel emotion, to cry, to be able to state that we aren't always we're not always the strong men that we need to portray ourselves to be. We go through some emotions. We feel the same pain that a lot of other people feel, and some of us have figured out better ways of dealing with it than others. I mean, some people, they don't know how to manage a certain amount of stress, and they do crazy things in that, because they're just either not used to that level of stress and anxiety, or it just becomes too much. And the mind, it's all about how strong the mind is, man. The mind is everything. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we are able to form and shape it, and be able to
The mind.
control it, and be able to make sure that we use it in the proper way, where we're not just using the information that we learned a long time ago that wasn't helpful for us. Just I now, the way that I treat things, as far as like the mind and everything that goes in, I treat it as a computer. It's what it is. It's a hard drive. Whatever we ingest, whatever we allow our time to be spent recording information into the brain, is what we become. And sometimes it could be useful information, and sometimes it could be complete dog shit. And the ones that are constantly just watching just garbage information become garbage, because that's all you pretty much provide your time to. And I see that a lot out in public now. It's hard for me to have conversations with people, and I'm just like, like I don't have nothing here to, like, I don't have nothing in common. I'm not of this world that you're in. The type of conversations that you're trying to provide me is something that I don't find any value in, because it's nonsense. It's like, I don't. Why are you asking me about how much my car is worth, or what type of cool gadgets I have, or stuff like that. Stuff that we hold value to, that is is nonsense. And fuck, I got lost. What was the topic? Where was Anrina?
You were talking about, how our
Oh,
brains are
brains. Okay,
sponges
okay,
and computer
yeah.
systems.
So yeah, that's how I see ourselves, man. We're just sponges, and kids, man, they need to be treated with that delicacy, because they absorb all of that good information and the bad. I've noticed it in my daughters too, and I kick myself every time, because I'll hear my daughters yelling at each other, and I'm like, fuck. The only reasons why they do that is because they learned it from us, and that's where I'm trying to cut
Yep,
back. Hey, hey, hey! Stop yelling at your sister. We don't do that. And then my part is to not do that as well. And that's
exactly.
just the example. I can't just tell them not to do it and do it myself. So it's always about setting the example. Whatever it is that you're telling them not to do, you shouldn't be doing it as well. Because when they see you, they're gonna they the human mind of a child does not compute the same way that an adult's mind computes. And we have to understand that. We have to get to that level of understanding that they don't operate in the same way that we do. Sometimes it feels that way, because some kids feel grown as hell, like my daughter, that I feel like she's a teenager, but they still they still don't see it the same way. They don't understand it the same way. They're kids, and we have to understand that.
Well, and I feel like that's a good transition to what I wanted to say about genetics. Because I know Mike had something. I'm glad Mike went first. Uh, but that's solid that you said they're like sponges, because I was doing some research on it. And you know how as you get older, uh, our perception of time gets a lot better, right? And we're like, holy crap, where did the month go? The next thing you know, you're talking about where did the year go? Next thing you know, it's like 10, 20 years later, and you're like, how did that happen so fast? Like, I don't remember my childhood going by that fast. And it's honestly because the way your brain works when you're a child is different, and so it's more euphoric. And you know how as adults we can get high and it slows our perception of time. Kids' brains are in this heightened state of euphoria in which actually their time does or gets perceived as moving slower, and they are like sponges. And that means it's our job as the parent to move as the filter. Move in as the filter. We have to filter what those sponges absorb. And we're not going to be able to filter everything. That's the other thing, is a lot of parents, like Jay called it, helicopter parenting. We're trying to block them from every little thing, and then they don't get a solid perception of what reality is. So when they become an adult, rather, they are shocked. It's a culture shock because we shielded them from all of those things. And so one thing I wanted to hit on genetics, and this is why I'm glad that Mike talked about that book first, is because I'm sick and tired of people blaming genetics for a lot of things. And the only funny thing that I found to be true in genetics, and this is actually one of my doctors back in the day told me this, and because people are like, oh, it's in your genetics, or that runs in the genes. And so I was seeing the doctor, and he was like, hey, you want to hear a joke? And I was like, yeah, because I was having a bad day or whatever. And he's like, diarrhea is you inherit that from your parents? And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, you get diarrhea through heredity. And I was like, really? Because this doctor would not lie. He never jokes around or anything. He's a pretty stoic guy himself. And I was like, huh, I never knew that. He said, yeah, it runs in the genes. And just starts dying laughing, dude. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude, this guy totally pulled the wool over my eyes. Totally awesome setup. Yeah, diarrhea runs in the genes, so it's genetic. And anyways, I was doing research in genetics, right? The only genetics we give our kids is that, it takes a sperm and an egg to make one of them, right? But we don't decide which sperm gets into which egg. We don't decide if that cell formula or whatever we're calling it embeds in the lining of the uterus. We don't decide if it starts to multiply cells and grow into a little human being. That's not on the mom. That's not on the dad. That's on that new life form, right? And so I come from a physical training background, and man, I drank all the Kool-Aid. People talk about, oh, you drank the Kool-Aid or you sipped the Kool-Aid. Dude, I took the Kool-Aid, man, and I tipped him over and I drank the whole thing, man. So a lot of times people are like, all these anatomical differences in people, they're like, oh, this through genetics. And the more research I did and the more I learned, I was like, that's bullshit. And you should shut your mouth when you say that. Mm-hmm. And probably shut your mouth when you talk to me. And the reason why I feel so strongly about it is because I looked at quite a few studies, and there, unfortunately, are studies and they weren't purposeful. Kids were born and the parents neglected the kids through addiction, abandonment, whatever. And these kids were left alone with no one to watch. And they grew older because that's what time is. And when they were found, and I'm not trying to bash any type of religion or anything, this is just the facts from these reports. These kids acted like apes. They walked with their feet and their hands, their fists, whatever. They moved not like we would think an average human being moved. And the thing that I was thinking about in that time was, man, if it was genetics, they would be walking the same way the dad would, or the mom would, or whoever's genetics were stronger in that child. But it turns out it's what they learned. And then you start you get into these different body types in humans. They got mesomorphic human body types. They've got ectomorphic, endomorphic. Mesomorphic means they got larger bone structures and more musculature naturally. And then you have the ectomorphs who are tiny and skinny, and endos that have more fat and skin cells right off the bat. And then I learned that it was uh, not a psychologist, but a psychologist. Says psychiatrists are the one that do meds. So it was a psychologist who came up with these three main body types, right? And what I started to put together, and this is a theory in my own mind, is that genetics are kind of like how you guys are describing it. It's that neuroplasticity. So whatever we're learning, whatever new neuron pathways that we're building in these kids is now being considered genetics. And so we have to watch things very closely, right? Because our consciousness, on our kids, it's not like 50% of my kid is my consciousness and 50% of my wife is the other 50% of my kid's consciousness, right? That's not how it works. They're a different person completely. And so whether you believe that it's a spirit that God gives you, or whatever gods or whatever, or if you believe it's a computer, or it doesn't really matter, it's this cognitive ability, right? And like Jay said, there isn't much of one. It's not designed yet. And so throughout their life, they're designing it. And that's why it's so important for us to act in those certain ways, because in the beginning, think about it, kids don't come out of the womb speaking English or speaking whatever your native language is. They don't. They don't understand it. When you get a new dog, they don't understand it. When you get a new cat, they don't understand it. All living things have to learn the language. So before they're learning this verbal language, they're watching us. And it's our actions that build their mind. Jay, you look perplexed, bro.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to better understand your definition of genetics as far as what aspect of genetics is it that you feel that people have a misconception about?
So I think genetics gets confused with like the cognitive state of humans, rather than just DNA cells.
Okay. So more into like characteristics is what you're saying?
What do you mean characteristics?
So let's say when people use the excuse that, oh, that's just genetics in regards to the reasons why they do certain things or they act certain ways or they're into certain things.
Yeah. That's not genetics. That's learning from the parents. And I'm saying it goes deeper. So for an example, Mike knows this, but I've been pretty solid about doing rehabilitation style exercising for quite some time now.
Fucking A, right? I know
It's
it.
due to yeah, it's due to a back injury from a car accident, and so I'm building the house from the ground up, working on my arches and my feet to strengthen my ankles and strengthen my knees and my hips. And one of the things is I don't really have a butt, right? A gluteus maximus, minimus, and medius, right? Like it's underdeveloped. And so a lot of people would say that's genetics because neither of my parents have, developed glute, right? And what I found is that it's not true. It's not genetically, uh, in my DNA. It's not some cell makeup that makes my glutes, right? Like there are some anatomical differences in different humans. However, the my lack of glutes is actually learned through the movement patterns of my parents, right? Like as kids, we watch our parents walk. They're the ones who teach us how to walk, and so therefore, walking is the first thing that we're learning. And walking, actually, you should be engaging your glutes as your prime movers. Hamstrings, unfortunately, are known as secondary movers, but oftentimes in modern America, where there's a lot of sitting and lack of engagement in the glutes, hamstrings become the primary mover, which actually moves the glutes to secondary movers and causes them to be underdeveloped. And so, even though it's an anatomical thing that people might say, oh, that's genetics, it really isn't. It's just that as a kid, I watched my parents move and walk, and I replicated that because as kids, we don't understand everything. And as parents, we're not great instructors. So, what we develop is parrots, something that can regurgitate information that we've given them. And then the kid just does that thing. And so, therefore, it's not genetics, it's just my cognitive ability to understand a certain task. And I either had the skill or lagging skill, or enough lagging skills to be able to uh, create a behavior or adaptive behavior to generate a successful outcome.
Yeah, that what you just said there had my mind fucking blown, right? Because it went straight into something that I am. That's kind of how I see things, right? Everyone's a blank slate, and everyone just learns everything from sight. Everything that we become is just basically learned behavior. Everything that we come across is what we record in our brain, and then we somehow decipher what we decide to emulate or portray out. The only particular thing that I'm
Yeah.
still kind of hung up on in with genetics, that I guess maybe it's better to get a better understanding of what the definition of what I consider it, or why I'm still kind of
Sure.
like. So in my situation, right, I got three daughters. They're all
Yeah.
different ages, so I've been able to have that experience of having each one of them in that same stage as they all grow up. And there are
Right.
certain characteristics that each one of them has, that each one of them has grown up completely different doing than the other one. Each one of them is completely different than the other one. That's where I completely agree that each child is their individual soul. They're completely, that's who they are. They are themselves. But there are certain things that I've picked up on with my daughters that they'll have that, that thing about me that I recognize in myself, or that my wife recognizes in me, that they do, that maybe the other one doesn't do it, or that the younger one doesn't do it. But that's something that I always do, but they don't all do. So like my middle child is very creative. She's very artistic, she's very detail oriented. That's me. That was me, and she's a perfectionist. Now I find myself having to try to it's like seeing myself, my younger self, and trying to tell myself, no, that way that we grew up was incorrect. So in a sense, it feels as if that was passed on. Those emotions that I had, this particular child has that because her way of dealing with certain like situations, it becomes very stressful because if it's not done her way or the way that she has in her brain that it needs to work, then she gets very upset and it's a temper tantrum and it all hell breaks out. But
Right.
then there are characteristics that my other daughter has that are more like my wife that
Uh huh.
she didn't pick up from me. And there's interests that she has that are more familiar to like one that I have or my wife has that my other daughters don't have. So
Yep.
that that's where I guess maybe there's a confusion where we think that, oh, it's genetics that's the reasons why they are like that. Maybe they just the way that their brain is set up only picks up on certain things that we display or they pick up from us.
So this hopefully this will ease your mind a little bit. Their brains aren't set up in any particular way.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's important about Mike and mine's current job is that it says that we must be very good at taking complex material and turning it into simplified terms. So, what I want you to think about while we're discussing what you just said is simplifying your thoughts about those things, those characteristics in your daughters. Let me ask you this. Were you the same person when each one of your daughters was born?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah? You had the same exact interests, the same most important value every time one of your daughters was born.
For at least two of them, yeah. And those two are completely different.
Or, okay, all right. Did you spend the same amount of time with both of them when they were born?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, about
About. Yeah.
about okay. Now, if it's not you, right? You'd have to ask about your wife. But I bet you if I asked you those two same questions, but instead of you about your wife, you would give me a similar response, right?
More than likely. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what changed in your guys' life between daughter one and daughter two? Nothing,
Nothing.
right? You both were the same
Yeah.
people, and you both were like, we're having a baby, right? Except for something changed, Jay. The first daughter, you didn't have a daughter for her to learn from and share time with or share parents with. The second one, you had a daughter. So there was a third interactive human being to put input on that empty little sponge.
That is so, and I will probably continue to view it differently. But yeah, I agree with you that they pick up on and they learn from the other kids, and especially I've noticed that with my daughters because the younger one has grown up way faster than the other two, and it's because she has older sisters that she's learning from, and so she's
Right.
picking up things
Yep.
way quicker. But there is still something in the mannerisms and the things that they do that I can't define that as something that I even portrayed in front of her for her to be able to pick up. So there's certain
Sure.
things like that that I don't think can be defined that way. And it's another
Maybe.
thing that I go back to as well when it comes to a lot of things, as far as history and a lot of things that we develop as definition for things. We have to remember that the human mind is also developing these things as far as definitions, and everywhere around the world we create, everybody probably finds their own way of defining something. So in one particular aspect of a particular world, that may make sense to a certain individual, but then to somebody else it doesn't, because there's obviously other factors that it's just like, wait, but that doesn't fit into my personal experience. So those are where
Sure.
clashes happen, where I have to, not agree, because I feel that there is certain characteristics that get passed on that we just can't help, in that sense, that they do
Sure.
pass on, they do somehow still develop. Like, I have one daughter that's way braver than the other, and that's the younger one is way braver than the older one. My eldest daughter is very, very panicky. It takes her a lot to learn certain things, like anything that might be athletic or just physical, and she gets very frustrated. That's the frustration part. That was my wife. The 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 risk taker, I think that comes from me. My daughter was able to learn a lot of things before my eldest daughter was able to pick up on these things, because she was able to just have that in her to be more risk taking and just not, be scared of things like my other daughter. So I have those issues now, or not issues, it's just one daughter I have to try to guide her into being more
Open.
open, just being more positive when she's thinking about certain things. Then I have the other one that I have to just tell her not to be, uh, you know, just to figure out, trying to help her figure out a different way of just expressing her emotions, because she does them in frustrations. So that right there
Right.
is where I see myself, where it's my inner self. That's what I'm seeing being portrayed there. My inner self,
Yeah.
that I I felt that that's how I wanted to express myself, the way that she is doing. And so now I feel like, okay, I have to teach her that that's not the right way, because if she grows up continuing to feel that that's the right way, she's going to have a hard time in her teenage years, in her adult years, because this is something that I see as something that maybe I passed down somehow, because somehow that attaches to the genetics. Just like what we were discussing earlier when Mike was saying that, you also teach that to, your adopted son, and they've picked up on that, and the expectation is that they'll also be able to pass that on to, their child, and so they'll have the same characteristics that you have. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at as far as where I feel about that as far as genetics. I think that there's something in regards to that a little bit of some of you gets passed down to your child, and then it just gets more manifested with the reinforcement of it being in person, where you're actually demonstrating it and they're picking it up on it. Because I just feel that with my creativity that I have, that I've always had growing up, I see that already on one of my daughters, and she's really good at it. Like, I can tell that if she continues on, and that's what I'm now trying to do, motivate her into, continue on. Oh, this is really good. Just continue doing what you're doing, and then just progressing that.
Right. You know, just to save you from possibly sleeping on the couch, because I'm not sure if your wife listens to this podcast or not. My cousins, before I started having kids, they told me, my cousin Melissa specifically, she got three boys, three boys, and with the first one, same characteristics of your oldest daughter, right? Very timid, cautious, things like that. And then the middle and youngest, they're kind of like, with each one of them, they're more risky, as you put it. And the reason is it's a reflection on our parenting. Um, we are passing that down to them, because think about it, when all of us have our first kid, if it's our first time, we're not really sure what to do with this thing. We just know that we have to cradle this precious thing because they're so easily breakable, right? And we got to shield them from everything. And that's kind of us as a brand new parent is, and that's an over exaggeration, right? But we're like, oh, it's our first, we got to do all these things. And then you get inoculated to that. And by the time you have the second one, you're not so much shielding, but you're like kind of holding it. And, maybe with your first kid, when you passed it to your wife to hold, you're like, oh, make sure the cradle the head. And then by the second one, you just like, here, take this baby because you're tired, right? And then, as my cousin Melissa put it, is, by the time you get to the third, you're like throwing the kid across the room like a football, right? Like, hey, it's your turn, catch, right? Because you're so inoculated to it, and you realize kids are so durable. And it's not like we're actually tossing kids or anything, but as we get more years and experience and knowledge with parenting, we start to loosen up. And that's why generally we see, parents that stay together and have multiple kids. The youngest kids are usually the ones that are the biggest risk takers and jumping off of things and smashing into things. And it's because as parents, the first one, we're like, they have all of our attention. We're like, oh, don't hurt, and all these things. And then that gets old. The second kid, now you have two kids running around the house and they're both going crazy and they're making messes. And then you just get tired and you're not going to respond. And then the third one comes and you're like, what was that sound? And then maybe the other parent's like, I think it was a head. It sounded like a forehead hitting the floor. And you're like, I don't hear any crying, so I think we're good. And then you go back to what you're doing. So, like, I think it's a little bit of a reflection of as us as parents and our emotional regulation as it is to raising our kids.
I think it's just a combination of everything, man.
Yeah, it could be, dude. And to be honest, I love the way that you're articulating it too. It sounds beautiful, and you passed on to your kid that creative gene. That's a gene I think a lot of people wish they had.
Yeah, because I can see that my eldest daughter, she's not into it. That's not what she gravitates towards, and she's already the one that's not even interested in toys anymore. I we have a neighbor that comes upstairs to come and play with our daughters, and she just she'll sit there and just either read a book, be on the tablet playing something, or listening to something, or watching TV while the other two are playing with dolls, and she's just like whatever. And that little girl is older than her, and it's just I don't know. I know that I want her to enjoy her childhood, but I also recognize that she's a little advanced as far as her conception, as far
Yeah.
as her understanding life. Like we've had some deep talks. As I've already gotten to the point where I've had some like talks with her where I'm just like, wow, like I'm hearing this from a
Yeah,
7 year
that's
old.
awesome.
Like she's giving me like her definition of life randomly, like in a conversation, and I'm just like, what?
Dang, that's sick.
And
That's awesome.
yeah, it's so it's like we all always develop our perspective and our definition and our opinions from our own experiences. So when I experience those things, I'm just like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And that's the thing, right? Feelings could be misleading as well. Like I understand that as well. That maybe you are
Sure.
100% correct, but damn, man, that's not what that feels like. It feels different to me. It feels like there's something being passed on, each from a little bit from me, a little bit from my wife. Just even in just the way that they physically look. Obviously, that's part of what genetics is, the physical looks on faces. But you can see that even each one of my daughters has 3 different types of hair. They don't look like sisters at all. They all look completely different, which is hilarious.
Nice.
So yeah, that's I think we've reached a good 1 hour and a half mark here. So we'll call it quits for this week's episode.
Your buddy.
As this is Father's Day, whether we're recording this, guys, happy Father's Day. Hope you guys enjoy
Father's Day to you too.
Thank you. Hopefully you guys have some good
happy
stuff
Father's
planned
Day.
and you guys enjoy the day. Well, we'll be joining everybody next week for another episode of the Street Stoics. Thank you guys for joining this time. Later.
Adios.
Vaya con Dios.
Peace.